From Wacko Chaka Studio, I'm Ashwin Chako, and this is The Fruitful Life, a show about the business of creativity and the stories behind the creators that have made their dreams a reality. Hey folks, welcome to The Fruitful Life. Charlotte, CEO of the IDI, or the Irish Design Institute. Hi, Charlotte.
Morning, Ashwin. How are you?
Good, and yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. So, before I ask you about who you are and everything about you, I like to start with a little icebreaker question. If you were a fruit, what fruit would it be and why?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. I would be the first thing that came to mind is a strawberry.
Okay.
Why? Because it's small but powerful and tasty. So there,
Oh, yeah.
I would be a strawberry.
That's great. Well, that's good to hear that you'd be a strawberry. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Charlotte Barker. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Designers in Ireland. We're the largest representative body for professional designers in Ireland. So we represent designers from a whole range of design disciplines. So everything from illustration and graphic design, visual communication, right through to UX, UI, or interior design. We have strategic design disciplines like service design. So a huge breadth. It's a very privileged position to be in, to be able to represent all these amazing creative disciplines.
Wow, that is a lot. I would love to hear more about that further down, but let's start with you. Tell us about, were you creative as a kid? What started you down this creative path that you're on as the head of a giant design institute in Ireland?
Yes, I suppose I was creative as a child. So I wasn't creative in an artistic sense. I cannot draw. My eyes don't even work together, like but I grew up surrounded by creativity. So my mum was a dancer.
Mm.
And so I grew up really in the wings watching my mum perform on stage. So I was surrounded by drama and colour and creativity and performance. And I think that kind of bedded in very early on, this love for uh, being being in your imagination. And I think
Mm.
that's something that has probably stuck. So I've always been an avid reader. I love to read. I love to use my brain to create new worlds or imagine new worlds. And I actually think that's still an important part of creativity, is that you escape into another world. And that's a very important part of creativity in my mind.
Yeah, I suppose, I think we forget this, but the one thing that separates us from every other creature on earth is our imagination. And now that imagination can be funneled and used for good. And so that's how things like the phone came about. It was a transformation. Somebody imagined speaking to somebody else and then it became a reality. It can also be funneled for negatively, and that's what our fears are. They're basically our imagination on steroids. So it's I think that's such an important point to remember, that imagination is key. Um, well, what is the sort of role you imagined for yourself as you started growing out, growing up as a kid? What are the sort of steps you took to come to the position you are in today?
Well, I think very early on, I thought I had kind of two options ahead of me. One was either I was going to be an actress, I would be
Oh,
some in some way part of the performing arts,
hmm.
or a journalist. So again, my love of stories, my love of language. I get a kick out of words, and so I think I always wanted to do something that was in a creative sphere, that was something that always piqued my interest. That was where I naturally landed all of the time. So that was the intention. So when I as I went through school, I would have studied performing arts. I would have done English. As I grew up in the UK, so I did my GCSEs and I did my A levels, and then I went on to university. And when I started university, I thought I wanted to do English originally, and then realized that it was very academic. And actually, that didn't really suit me. It doesn't suit the way I learn or the way I'm sort of interested in things. So I switched to media studies, which was, I think I had 8 hours a week to study. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily an academic program. It wasn't like sit down and read these massive texts and tell us what they mean. It was more very much self-initiated learning. So I think in a way, even though it wasn't, a very, in some ways, a very, challenging program, it was in that it taught me a huge amount of life skills, that you have to be very self-starting. And in order to get my degree, I had to create they called it an independent study unit, which I now think is just a get out of jail free card. But anyway, at the time, it was a great opportunity for me to say, well, look, gosh, what does this mean? How do I do this, and how can I further my studies while also working? So I took the opportunity then to get myself in a work placement, and I started in a PR company. So that's what I did when I first started my career. And when I graduated, I actually started in PR. So that was the start of my professional journey.
And where did you go from there?
So I was living in Sheffield at the time, and I stayed there for 5 years, and I worked in a company that grew from 4 people to 15 people. So we had a number of of creative disciplines within that one small agency. So we did PR, we did events management, graphic design, video production, and photography. So it gave me a great rounded view of lots of different complementary and interdisciplinary skills and areas of creativity that I really enjoyed. From there, myself and my now husband, moved to Vancouver. So we were in Canada for 2.5 years.
Oh,
And at that point, I thought, well, I just want to see what job I get. I wasn't still very clear about what I wanted to do. I absolutely want to work in a design studio. Because I'd had this exposure to different creative disciplines, I was still quite open to really working in anything. And I was in my mid-20s, I suppose, at the time. So I ended up working in a graphic design studio in Canada. And I worked there for 2.5 years, and it was fantastic, and, an amazing lifestyle opportunity as well as a professional opportunity. So really had lots of incredible stimulus and input from the life we were living, as well as my career. So I was working in a studio of 15 people, and I was in the client services team. So I was managing projects on behalf of clients. We had clients in North America and Canada. So really nice mixture, and, challenging new ways of working and different, cultural considerations that I needed to adapt to. So really good experience. Then we decided to move home. So we moved to London. And we were in London for a year, but that was then 2008 and the start of the recession.
yeah.
So at that stage, my husband's company made him redundant, or sorry, my husband's company gave him the option of either being made redundant or moving to Dublin, because they were going to relocate their office to Dublin.
Mm.
And we looked at each other and said, let's go to Dublin. Let's try Dublin. We weren't loving London at all. It was hard graft,
Mm.
and it was time to try something new. So we came to Dublin in 2008. So we've been here 14 years, and no regrets. Won't be looking back.
Half the time, well, I've been here half the time now, so yeah, double parallel there. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. That your path was so similar in one sense that when I left high school, I, the decision was either study English or visual communications. And fortunately, I got into the viscom. um, course, but if I hadn't, I would would have been doing English or writing in some form or some capacity.
Right.
But it's great to hear your journey because I think a lot of the times when we start off one way, some of those dreams and aspirations come back full circle. So like I never thought I'd be writing, but now I'm an author for children's books. So the writing capacity has made its way back. Have you had any of those full circle moments for yourself where with your writing and some of the creative acting or like those initial ideas that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the job I have now, when you're in a leadership position, you have to pull on all of your skill sets and everything, so I feel that in this role, one day I might be writing a press release, and I know how
Mm,
to do that because I did that at the very start of my career.
yeah.
I have to speak on stage frequently, so I'm performing, I have to understand how to work with an audience and how to address an audience. And then obviously strategy. I mean, that's such a core fundamental part of what I do is very strategic, and making sure that we deliver against the vision of the board and that we're really driving Irish design forward.
Mm,
And then also the client services part of it, a huge part of my role is building relationships
yeah.
and having really strong relationships, whether that's with our members or whether it's with partners, whether it's with funding bodies. There's lots and lots of ways and means by which all of my skill sets are now coming together. And that's why I love it, because I get to do everything.
That's brilliant. I would love to dig deeper into some of the strategy elements of your role because I think strategy is so pivotal to every creator's journey, and so it'll be great to hear about what makes good strategy and how that can affect a creative's or a business's outlook on their capacity to make an impact.
Yeah, so I think that strategy in a creative world
Mm,
is it's the ability to connect the magic and the logic. So both are equally important and both are necessary to progress. So I think what often happens is that designers don't think necessarily from a business capacity. They don't
mm,
always think about the fact that what they are doing has a value, and that therefore that value needs to be nurtured
mm.
and it needs to be invested in from a personal perspective as well as from a client payment perspective, and so on and so forth. So there is a strategy that can go with that, that whether it's around who is my target market and who am I doing this for and why do I want to grow, just answering some really fundamental questions. That's strategy at its basic level. It's just
Yeah.
the who, where, when, what, why. Like, as long as you can answer those things, you're on the road to strategy. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? So for me, when I started my job as the chief executive of the IDI, there wasn't really a strategy in place for the IDI because up until that point, it was being led really by volunteers. So a huge amount of work was being voluntarily input into furthering Irish design, which was unsustainable for the size of the industry. And hence I was appointed. So the first thing I did was a strategy because I needed to know, where are we going?
mm.
Why are we going there?
Yes.
And also understanding what to say no to as well as what to say yes to. Otherwise, you can find yourself in the scenario where you say yes to everything
Mm,
and you don't really know why you're saying yes to things. So it's not strategic, and you can end up, I think that's really the fastest road to burnout,
yeah.
where you don't really understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. So strategy for me is a framework. It's a building block. It shouldn't be something that binds you. It should be something that guides you and makes you feel very confident in the decisions that you're making and the path that you're on. And ultimately, I think strategy should be personally rewarding.
Mm.
You should feel as though any strategy that you have in place is something that you feel you are achieving against. It's a measure, it's a benchmark. So it's a really, I love strategy. I think it's a fabulous thing to have.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with you. I think the largest switch for me in my career was when I realized that I needed to be more strategic with my time. Otherwise, I was expending my time pointlessly in projects that weren't making an impact in my larger goal or vision. And I love the 80-20 rule. So 20% of your input should create 80% of your output. And so I like to put that into how I strategize for my year. But
And I wonder if
yeah,
when you made a switch to being more strategic, did you feel more of a sense of achievement as well? That did you feel that achievement was coming through?
100%, because then I could measure the actions to the goals that I was trying to get to. And so
Right?
rather than, throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that something
Yeah,
sticks, I was like, okay, here are some things that I'm going to test and
yeah,
see what's working. And now I can measure them against the other things I'm trying out. And that in the long run means I can then say, okay, milestone 1 has been met,
yeah.
milestone 2, and then those milestones help me get to the larger vision or goal that I have.
That's exactly it. And I think what's also so important is that we have to be self-congratulatory, if that's even a word
Yeah,
that I can even get
yeah,
out of
yeah,
my mouth.
yeah.
We have to congratulate ourselves,
Mm.
because not everybody does that. You can't be looking all the time for external validation. So in a way, if you've got a strategy and you've got something to benchmark against, it's a really good chance to go, well done, you, well done, me. Didn't I? Well done, me. you know, and that keeps a very positive mindset and a very positive spirit, I suppose, to your work, which is a really, really good, healthy headspace to be in when you're working on a daily basis.
I think that's a very key point there. Celebrating the little victories, because that actually keeps you motivated to keep moving forward when you're hitting barriers or you can't get past the
Right?
next benchmark. You're like, okay, at least I achieved this little bit here.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
that keeps you going. But I think there's another thing that you touched on that I want to loop back to, which is the idea of designers not understanding value and what we can do to teach designers to understand that, the fact is a business needs your contributions in order to be successful as a business. And so there is not only a monetary value, but the impact of that design on the largest scale of who the potential audience is and how the brand can then communicate. What can we do, or what can designers do to better understand their value?
I think it's important to look at what your role models are doing, or really do the research and understand where you have somebody that you really admire, and really understand how they got to the point that they did. Just that peer learning is incredibly important. I think continuing to learn is also really important, making sure that you're
Mm,
very confident in your skills. We have a need to drive a culture of learning and development within the design sector. We have a really fast moving sector, and things change constantly, whether it's the introduction of AI or whether it's changes in society that mean we have to design in a different way, or whether it's planet, we're designing for planet now and have different considerations than maybe designers 20 years ago would have had. It's constantly moving, so we need to make sure that we're always learning, and in learning we're creating value. We are creating a sense of offer that not every industry has. There's a lot of people that rely, or a lot of businesses that rely on the creativity of a designer and the way that a designer's brain works in order to really further their business. We are the heart of innovation. We are the heart of change. So it's so important that we have the confidence and we feel that confidence in our value to be able to then make sure we're charging correctly, we're behaving correctly with clients. There's lots and lots of ways and means by which we can continue to focus on the value of design.
Yeah, for sure. What I'm hearing is ensuring that you have a growth mindset that so that you can keep growing your abilities. And then the second thing, would you say the core of a designer is that they are problem solvers at heart? And so their ability to adapt to the time, to stay up to date, and to tweak the strategy around a business helps ensure that the value of the business goes up and then their value in turn, or the
Yeah.
exchange of that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the value of design is intrinsic to the value of innovation within businesses. It's proven. There's Harvard Business Review studies. There's McKinsey studies. Like you just, if you start to read the economics of design,
Mm.
you can see that it's a fact. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Danish design ladder, but it's a very interesting model where you look at where design is within an organization,
Hmm.
and you look at the productivity or the value of that company. So if in a company where, at the bottom of the ladder, you have companies where design is accidental or it's kind of unthought of, and it's not really considered. And then you climb that ladder through to where, design is engaged as a service and it's seen as a kind of an aesthetic and a kind of add-on, part of a marketing function. That's kind of the next step up the ladder. But then when design gets very strategic, or when design gets into the C-suite and it gets in at the chief executive level, and it's a design-led business, that's when you see really interesting businesses and really innovative businesses. The really, really obvious example of that is Apple.
Mm.
They're absolutely a design-led business. They were one of the first companies to really think from a universal design perspective. So
Yeah.
creating products that are accessible to everybody. It's an inclusive design. And like, I don't have to tell you how successful Apple is. I'm sure you're looking at many Apple products around you right now, as I am. So that there is a massive value to design. And I think sometimes we can forget it. There is a humility in designers that is natural. Many designers are more comfortable in an introvert space than to be extrovert. It's absolutely understandable and great. But at the same time, we don't have to be standing on a stage to say I'm amazing. It's that's not what I'm saying. Like, but what we need to do is just have the confidence that the work that we're doing is really valuable.
But within that scenario, I've found that sometimes when designers do understand their value and they're trying to get that across, there still can be quite a lot of friction between companies and designers, because maybe the designer understands the value, but the client doesn't yet.
Yes.
So how can because you do so much with relationship management between building relationships with the IDI and companies and design studios, what do you think are things that can be done to ensure that there is uh, better communication, the ability to really express or articulate that value so that both parties feel like they're getting the most out of the relationship?
You just hit the nail on the head, because you said it's about communication.
Yeah.
And it is. At the end of the day, it all comes down to really good communication. So the important thing is that the designer understands the client's world, and they
Mm.
understand the pressures on the client, and they understand the problem that the client is trying to solve.
Mm.
So if a designer can position themselves in that headspace, this is like every empathy skill you have, you've got to
Yeah.
pull out at this stage and go, right, what are they trying to achieve? What do they have to do? What are their pressures internally? who do they have to seek approval from before they can sign off on this thing?
Mm.
Really understanding the client's need, the client's aim, the client's ambition, and having that deep understanding. That's where you start to help demonstrate the value of design. The good design response is going to come from that deep understanding anyway. So it's all win-win. The
Yeah.
more that you can really make sure you've got a really good brief and a really good relationship with your client, that's going to go a very long way to demonstrating the value of the work that you do.
So do you have any tips on better communication? Are there like some top tips on at your fingertips?
Listening.
Mm.
Listening is really key. Not I think what often happens in, say, creative presentations is designers are rightfully very focused on the technicalities of the work that they have done. So they may say, "Oh, I did this amazing piece of work, and I set my kerning to this because," and the designer, the client's like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." And so it's putting it into a very different narrative, so that
Mm.
when you're presenting your work or you're presenting your creative concepts and your ideas, that you're speaking the client's language, and not your own, that you're not speaking around, well, I chose this font because it's the latest, it's just been released and it's from this amazing, foundry. And it's like,
Yeah.
don't care. Is it going to solve my problem or is it not? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that for me that's the basis of really good communication. That's what I would
Mm.
say is the top tip, is just get under the skin of the client. Like really, really give the time to that. Think about, like, strategically, again, think strategically about what the piece of work you're doing for a client is trying to solve. And then communicate back to them why what you've done will do that. And I think if you always have that in mind as well through the creative process, the output is going to be stronger. It is going to be better. So it stops being, I don't know, like if you're thinking about a wayfinding project, for instance, when you're looking at it on a screen, you really can't get that sense of what it's like in situ. You just
Mm.
can't. You're staring
Yeah.
at pixels on a screen. So what you need to be able to do is keep in your mind, like the client has said, these people just don't know how to get from A to B, because there's this barrier and there's this barrier. So when you're designing that, if you have that in your mind, you're going to create the solution. And then when you're presenting it back, you can say, this will work because, not,
Mm.
I chose these colors and these fonts because. You're
Yeah.
saying this will work because. So that's powerful communication then. That's something that is going to be more persuasive.
Mm.
And what ultimately that will do is it will reduce the rounds of amends that you have to do. It will reduce the to and fro, making sure there's a really good initial presentation is really, really key.
I think that is excellently put. Learning to speak the client's language and putting yourself in their shoes, because designers tend to use design vernacular, and that is often lost on clients who don't understand it. And the same with businesses. Businesses speak business vernacular, and
Yeah,
designers need to learn to speak that language so that they can better understand how to answer the problems that these businesses bring to them. I think the other tip I would say is really spend your time asking questions to your client, because most often the client hasn't fully formulated, or they might present or ask you to do something, but the the solution isn't necessarily the first answer. And so you need to dig deeper into, why are they asking you to do this, and what is their hope, or what is the goal that they want to achieve out of this job or out of this brief. And sometimes what the client asks for isn't necessarily what they need, and so it's
absolutely.
important to dig out that nugget, and then you can be strategic, because now you can answer that business problem straight away
That's
rather than you know
That
going
is
around the same
so
place.
important, Ashwin. That is so important is, you have to remember that sometimes a client might ask for something because they think that's the right solution, but actually you have the expertise and you have the knowledge. So if you understand the why, you can help solve the what. And that's so fundamental so that you don't end up on a track that you end up with something that might look absolutely beautiful, but it's not going to serve the purpose that it was intended to do. So again, back to just great communication, trust, build the trust with your clients so that you can demonstrate you're on their side. You know,
Mm,
I think sometimes designer and client relationships can become transactional. And that's
mm,
when it's a problem
yeah.
because the client is giving you a task to do, and then the designer is just doing a task. That's not releasing the value of design. That's
Mm,
not maximizing the potential of design. It's when the two come together and say, this is what we're trying to achieve. And then together they say, this is how we're going to do it. That's when it gets really good.
100%. That is on point. And I think a lot of designers need to hear this. Uh, The other thing I wanted to ask you, or that I'm curious about, is because you've been in so many leadership positions over time, I'm curious about, what are the keys to good management and good leadership? Because I find that sometimes a designer has a lot of potential, but if they're not managed well, or if that relationship is strained, then both the management isn't getting the best result for their business, and neither is the designer getting the best or isn't able to give the best potential work. What are some things you've seen over the years that might help for better relationships again and management?
So I think it comes down to a really good understanding of people as people.
Mm,
So we're all individuals, and everybody comes at their life and at their day and at their work with a different take, a different set of experiences and a different view and a different outlook. And I think it's really important that when you are managing teams or you are leading teams, that you have this really good understanding of people as individuals. Because what I've always believed, and have managed a number of teams from different sizes and in different countries with different cultures and different ways of working. At the end of the day, everybody has something to contribute. And what a good leader will do is figure out how they slot together. That's really important, is that you create a culture whereby it's an open culture. You can be heard, that people feel heard, that you are listened to, that you feel unafraid to raise a query. You've got to create a culture where it's okay to not be right immediately. I
mm,
really, really believe that. I've been in cultures where that was the thing that was kind of drilled into people, is it's got to be right first time. It just doesn't work. It just creates panic. It creates fear. We need to allow an element of failure
mm,
so that people are safe in their failure and they don't feel as though they're going to be immediately slung out the door because they've done something wrong or they've messed up. By the same token, in leadership, we have to drive standards. So we
mm,
can't just be going, no, we just fail all the time. It's absolutely fine. Can't do that either.
yeah.
But we can set an expectation of learning from failure and learning from mistakes. And that's okay as well, that we have to nurture that within individuals, is that you feel as though you can make a decision. It mightn't quite be the right decision, but that's okay. As long as you don't keep doing it and keep making the same mistake over and over again,
Mm,
we're going to keep moving forward. Everybody's going to keep moving forward and keep driving. So I think it's always a balance between knowing when to listen and when to invite input and commentary, but sometimes you do just have to hold the umbrella, is what I always say. Do you know, like the tour guides who
Yeah.
hold the umbrella and, you know, take people around the city? Sometimes you just got to hold the umbrella, and you've got to see that sometimes people just need to be led. They need a guiding light. So that's your responsibility in a leadership position, is to make the decisions, drive things forward, and make it happen. But by the same token, you need that balance of listening, inviting engagement, input, all of those things. So it's keeping that balance right, and knowing your team.
How much of that do you think is linked into building the culture of an office environment or a design studio? And what do you think is the key to a good culture that ensures that you are open to new ideas, but at the same time are not disseminating or falling apart to every idea that comes in to the to the room, you know?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Like, it's difficult. I'd be lying if I said it was easy to do that. I don't think it is easy, but ultimately somebody has to be decisive. And
Mm,
that's why leadership roles exist. You know, at some point somebody has to say it's that one, or it's that one. Um, and also to know that if you say it's that one and actually that's the wrong one, that then you can go, well, that didn't work. Now it's this one. You know, that's okay. That's
yeah, yeah.
okay. Like, it's okay. So it's just, you know, you have to have a culture of openness and a culture of, you know, learning. But at the same time, somebody at the end of the day has to be accountable. That's what
Mm.
leadership is. It's the accountability for the final decision that is taken.
Speaking of accountability, what do you think are some barriers that we're seeing within the current design industry, and how do you think we can be accountable and address them?
Yeah. So I think that we have a big confidence issue in design,
Mm,
and it's really important that we find a new confidence in the sector, in the value of the sector. You know, we've talked about this a little bit already, but you know, making sure that we drive a confidence in people who want to participate in the design community. They want design to be their career. We've got to help nurture a creative confidence in everybody. You know, we have to make sure that that confidence is there, and the personal sense of achievement is there, and driving people forward. Um, I also think that we sometimes suffer from being okay with the status quo,
mm,
and you know, we don't want to rock the boat. And again, maybe it's down to, you know, very you know, very nice and kind um sort of personality to the design sector. You know, we have a really lovely culture,
mm.
um but that could be seen sometimes as passive, whereas actually we maybe need to get a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So things like diversity and inclusion, you know, those efforts are going to come from being uncomfortable. They're going to come from having challenging conversations, and from challenging ourselves to think differently. So allowing a comfort with being uncomfortable is one way that we can look at how we're going to, you know, overcome some of the barriers that currently exist within our sector.
Do you think education around business should play a role with designers as well within this area of getting more confident? Because I feel like a lot of us designers come straight out of school and you know a lot about design, but you don't really know about the businesses that you're going to be designing for, or the industry that you will in in fact create value for.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a piece of work last year and went out and did some workshops and talked to different industry sectors. So we spoke to people who work in the construction sector, within the FMCG, so food and drink sector, within future mobility sector, so people who are developing like drone technology and cars that can't crash and all of this kind of stuff. These are all big growth sectors in Ireland, and
Mm,
therefore potential sectors for Irish designers to serve, right?
yeah.
And to work with and to contribute to. So we asked the people within these sectors, what's it like to work with designers, or what can designers do better? And they said they need to understand us better. They need to understand our business. They need to understand our world. Um, so you're absolutely right. That's exactly it. I think we need an understanding from a sectoral industry perspective, but also even the nuts and bolts of how a marketing team is structured, for instance, and how you might receive a brief and where that marketeer is coming from, like what's their background and how do
Mm,
they view the work of design, and how could you work together to maybe shift that perception. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, a deeper understanding of business and businesses and sectors, and the way that those sectors interact with design is really, really fundamental.
yeah. I hope that we see more programs that will help designers to do that, or more designers take the initiative on themselves to go forth and actually say, okay, yes, I am going to grow in this area. I know it's important. And that way we can ensure that rather than having a hierarchical relationship with our clients, that we come as equal partners, knowing that we're both pursuing the same end goal where both parties leave with the best results.
Exactly that. And then everyone has achieved.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So what are your hopes for the future? I mean, is there anything specific that you're looking forward to for yourself, for the IDI? Anything that you would like to share?
Well, we have huge potential in the IDI, and I
Mm.
find that very exciting. There are so many things to do. And, like I said earlier, the important thing is not saying yes to everything and making sure that we can just do things in a systematic way. We need to do a big brand piece this year. We're looking at our value proposition. So
Mm.
strategic work, we've got very strategic work that we need to continue doing for the IDI this year. I find that very stimulating. I'm really excited by that. Uh, but for me, my guiding light is fun. So I did a values exercise a few years ago. I was invited to be part of a workshop, and in the workshop, we were asked to write down what are your 10 top 10 values. So you write down your top 10, and people write trust and progress, or whatever they might be. So you write down your top 10 sort of values that you have.
Mm.
And then she said, right, take cut those down to 5. So you go, all right, okay, so you cut them down and you end up with 5. And then she said, cut them down to 3, and then you cut it down to 1. So you've got to be left with one value. What's your one what drives you? What is your top value in life? And mine was fun. And I stand by that. I feel as though fun is a really important part of life. We need to bring fun to our relationships, our families, our friendships, our colleagues, and our working environment. That's not to say it's frivolous. That's
Mm.
not to say the work we do isn't serious, but it's that you can bring a sense of fun into everything. And if you stop having fun, you need to stop doing what you're doing, and you need to change. So as long as I feel like I'm having fun, and for me, fun is intellectual stimulation. Fun is meeting new people. Fun is learning something that I didn't know. Like, fun comes from lots of different places. So that's what the future for me looks like. If I stop having fun, I'm going to do something else.
Amazing. And what's one piece of advice you would give to the next generation or young designers that are coming out right now?
My top piece of advice would be, don't rush. You don't have to rush. I think there is this sort of drive or this sort of perceived need to keep, climbing a ladder or being the next thing or having the next job title. And actually, we work for a really long time. I'm in my 40s, and I've still really got as much of my career ahead of me as I have behind me.
Mm,
So there's lots and lots of time to get into leadership positions. I think what's really important is that you build your confidence as you go. So by giving yourself time, you can get really good at something, really, really good at it. And then you
mhm.
can move on. And then you do away with, all these phrases like imposter syndrome that I just hate, like, don't be an imposter then. Don't
Yeah.
put yourself in that position. Just slow down, like, take a bit of time, become the expert, be really good at what you're doing,
Mm.
and then move, because you've loads of time, loads and loads and loads of time to move up and on. So for me, controversial or not, my advice is just slow down. Take the time, enjoy the moment, be mindful. Have a really good day-to-day experience, and be ambitious, absolutely, but give yourself time to achieve the ambition.
I suppose that T-shaped learning would be a good way to do that, in the sense you build expertise downwards in the T shape, but you also expand it sideways, so you understand lots of different things and they can be applied to your expertise. That'll make you a better leader when you get to that position, because a lot of the times we have designers who are great designers but not great leaders, and so we need to change that, and slowing down things is going to do that.
Yeah, we also run a really good program through the Design Skill Net. We have a design management professional diploma, because we realize it's a different set of skills. So
Mm,
you can hone your craft as a designer. You can be an amazing craftsperson, but if you've never managed a team, managed a budget, managed a client relationship, thought strategically on behalf of your business, thought strategically on behalf of your client's business.
yeah.
They're all new skills. There's a difference between managing and leading. So that's what the design management professional diploma does. Like, it gives designers the skills, and the courage and the confidence to be able to move into those leadership roles, because it's a different thing. But yeah, it takes time and experience to get to that point.
That's such a great resource, and I'm glad it's there. My last question to you is, what does the word fruitful mean to you?
The word fruitful means uh, productive. I mean, I think I initially think of it in a very literal way. Fruitful for me is a tree that is abundant in fruit.
Yes.
So there's an abundance to fruitful, and but there is a growth in fruitful, which I think is lovely. So abundance, maybe fruitful to me means abundance and progress, I think.
Mm, that's such a good definition of fruitful. I love hearing this because everybody has a slightly different interpretation. And
I
so the
want to know what everyone
combination.
else said. I'm desperate to know what everyone else says. I need to go and listen to everybody else.
So thank you so much, Charlotte. It's been amazing chatting to you. And hey, thank you all for listening to this episode of The Fruitful Life. I hope you walk away with some nuggets of wisdom from Charlotte. If you did, please do me a favor and leave a rating and a comment to tell me what you think of the show. Also, consider telling a friend that might like it. As always, be true, be you, stay fruitful.